who has a brief appearance in the book. Not enough is being said about what Jeffrey Thorne has done with Blood Syndicate. Brian, you appreciate this as a writer. It's hard to do a reboot of a series in which you're trying to pay homage to the original material, but you also want to make it fresh and new and give people surprises that they hadn't seen before, and also bring in a new generation of readers.
Yeah.
You know, Blood Syndicate came out when I was young. I'm an old dude. So Jeffrey Thorne has managed to be able to balance that, where he has stuff in there that me as an original Milestone guy from day one can appreciate, but someone who's picking up the book for the first time would also appreciate that book from a fresh perspective.
I did not read anything. I did not read anything Milestone because as a younger person, I didn't recognize the significance of how important Milestone was when it first dropped. Didn't read Static. I may have had one or two hardware, whatever, but I definitely didn't read Blood Syndicate at the time. Coming into it fresh, I'm really loving the story that Jeffrey Thorne has created around these characters who I have no knowledge of prior to reading these books.
Milestone. Let me say about Milestone. I'm kind of in the same boat with you, Mark, where I know of Milestone more in my adult life, where I went back and I read the older material before the new. Now, I didn't read all of it, obviously, but I went back and I read the older material before the new came. When I began to dive deeper, when I was reintroduced in my more adult life to comics, and it took more of an independent slate. You know, I got introduced to Dwayne McDuffie and Dennis Cowan, who they are and who Milestone was, and I really became hugely fascinated with that, with what they did. And so I dove into what they were doing, Icon and Rocket and so forth and so on. And so, you know, in my adult mind, I'm looking at what was, and I'm looking at what is now, and I'm enjoying the bridge. Like, you know, I went out and I made sure that I bought, you know, when Icon and Rocket and you know, when that whole launch of Milestone happened again, I made sure that I bought physical copies of all these issues. One, to support, but two, I wanted, you know, to have them, and I wanted to read them in hand. And I can see the bridge. Like, you know, it is a fine line to walk between what was and what is, and you know, to set forth of what is to come. And I think that Milestone has done an excellent job at creating this Dakota universe for this generation, for now. And I'm definitely looking forward to, you know, them just continuing to expand upon it, you know. And I think
it's been significant.
For those who don't know, tell people a truncated version of what Milestone is and its significance.
That's what I was about to do. So, for those of you who don't know, in 1993, actually they kind of started in 92, but the books were released in 93. Several comic creators went out and created their own company. Now, in the 90s, there was a lot of movement between creators and trying to gain control of their creations. There's a recognition that you had a lot of hot artists, a lot of hot writers who were creating these things that Marvel and DC were making tons of money on in merchandising, and these creators were getting nothing as a result. They were not getting, you know, you had Todd McFarlane working on Spider-Man and making that one of the hottest books in the world, and not getting any of the money off of the rebranding of the character that he created. You had Jim Lee, who did such a spectacular job on the X-Men. Chris Claremont ultimately left the book, and Jim Lee's version of the X-Men that he created ended up being what is now considered a classic cartoon. Those are Jim Lee's creations. A definitive run on the X-Men. So they've you know, Image, they formed their thing. Milestone did the same thing. These artists did the same thing. You had Dwayne McDuffie, you had Dennis Cowan, you had Derek Dingle, you had Michael Davis, and unbeknownst to many people, Christopher Priest was also one of the creators of Milestone.
Although these are black artists and creatives.
He's often uncredited because he ended up leaving and deciding to stay at Marvel at the time. But he's the one who actually came up with the Milestone logo and helped with many of the creations of the characters. I don't want to belabor the point because we literally have an entire Milestone roundtable series, which I really encourage all of you to go on YouTube and check out, because we put a lot of work and a lot of love into those series. And if you really want to learn about Milestone, that's where you want to go. I also highly recommend you check out the Milestone Generations documentary that's on HBO Max. There's also Robert. Let me finish. There's also Robert Kirkman's Secret History of Superheroes, the color of superheroes episode that he did. And then in terms of bridging that gap between the old books, it may be cost prohibitive for many people to buy all those old Milestone books. There's a Milestone compendium that's out that you can get at a reasonable rate to help you read those older books. So I'm a huge fan of Milestone. The Milestone books is really what turned me into a quote unquote a black collector and made me realize what was possible.
Did you watch the Static cartoon when it came out? Because I never did.
I watched a little bit of it. I'd aged out at that point. I was too old to watch cartoons in general. It was more kid generated. Look, Milestone. The Static cartoon was on at a time that I was in school or just starting my career, so I had other things going on in my life.
It's one of them things where, like, I remember in my early comic book collecting days when I was a kid, where it was just Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, and the Avengers, Wolverine, and by the time 1993, I was going into high school. My high school started in 8th grade, where I went to high school and became like, I'm kind of similar, where you're caught between kind of like this phase out thing where what side are you on, or not side, but you're trying to figure out who you are still. And I kind of missed the whole Milestone beginning, which I'm disappointed. Hindsight, I'm totally disappointed.
Right.
Totally disappointed in that.
I'm there with you.
And and I'm just like, the importance of this, and I mean, I'm really big on IP. I'm really big on independence, and for them to set out and to do this in the 90s, and me knowing what the 90s were like, and like especially hindsight, I'm just like, this is huge. This is great. And for it then to get stagnated for such a long time, and for now it to be back and for it to be in full motion with great backing. I mean, Hudlin is there. He has his hands on a lot of it, and that means transmedia and everything's there. That's very important. I like the fact that it's not connected to the DC characters right now. As far as I haven't read every book, but as far as I know so far and what I've read, in the main 3 series, it's not connected to the Supermans.
The Superman.
It's mentioned. It's mentioned an icon about
Superman does not survive their univer's.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I like the fact that this is something totally separate, and it's its own thing, and that DC Comics is allowing it to be its own thing.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that Milestone is its own entity, but it still is connected to DC Comics.